Hello everyone, this is Al-Fadi and I'd like to welcome you back to another video of this series on the Qira'at of the Quran. Sometimes we call it Ahruf and Qira'at, and basically myself and Dr. J. Smith, who is with me here in studio, are unpacking a number of issues, controversies, and really problems with this whole narrative concerning the so-called variant text readings. Today, we are going to visit this idea of qira'at and how the qira'at were formed. With that in mind, Jay, how were they formed?
Well, this is actually we're moving now from century to century to century, and we have been in the 8th and 9th century. Now we're moving back to the 7th century, and we've got to go back to the very beginning. We need to go back and show that when you talk about the qira'at, you need to really do a historical perspective. So let's go back and put up the slide, and let's look at what we know as the concern, what Muslims would claim as the 7 ahruf. Now you've said many times, what's the difference between ahruf and qira'at? It's confusing, isn't it?
It is, but I think you mentioned that, if I remember correctly, that Yasser Qadi has a simplified way of looking at it. He says the ahruf were the 7 different ahruf or dialects that supposedly the Quran was revealed, versus the qira'at were the transmitted form. I have to tell you, there is like 40 different views out there.
From 40 different people, each with their own opinion.
That's right.
And that's the difficulty that we're having. And so let's go back and let's see what the traditions tell us. And I keep bringing up the traditions. I'll be talking about that in another episode, the importance of the traditions in this whole narrative. So let's go back to the slide here. You can see it, the original 7 ahruf. This is pre-3632. So this is before Muhammad had died, that Muslims assume or claim, or the traditions claim, were there at the time of Jibril. And look at the graph right next to it. You can see Muhammad there, 632. And then you see a list of what we assume are Quran. Those are actually manuscripts. Those are the manuscripts. There's Umar. He doesn't have a manuscript, so we're not sure what that is. But Zayd ibn Thabit, Ibn Masud, and then forget about Uthman right now, Ubay ibn Ka'b, Ali's manuscript, and Abu Musa. So those are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 manuscripts that supposedly came from the companions of the Prophet.
Right, and at some point I want to point something related to that, but keep going.
That's the first generation. Okay?
Right.
Do we have any of those Qurans?
These are the Sahaba, basically.
The Sahaba, the
companions.
Do we have any of those manuscripts today?
Not to our knowledge. We have references to them. For instance, you have Arthur Jeffrey, who did an excellent job collecting many of these quotations by these basically, or recitations, I should say, by these Sahaba or companions in various Islamic sources.
But no manuscripts that we can look at, no manuscripts that we can hold. So let's just dispense with them for right now. Let's then look at the ones on the right. And take a look at the ones on the right, because those we supposedly do have. Notice that there are 7 green ones and there are 3 red ones. 7 green circles and 3 red circles for those who are looking for the 3rd red circle. Look at Khalaf down to the right and you'll see where he is. Now these are from Bernie Powers. These are his slides. I want to give credit to him. I've got him listed at the very bottom of the slide. He is just to show you, he wants to visually show you what we're referring to. Let's go to the next slide. When you look at the next slide, you can see there's generation 0, generation 1, generation 2, generation 3, and generation 4. What we're talking about today, what we have today is starting with generation 3. There is Asim, okay? And we have Hafs and Shoba are his 2 narrators.
Right.
But hold on a minute. What about generation 0, 1, and 2?
Yeah, why don't we have a qira'ah according to Uthman, qira'ah according to Ubay, qira'ah according to Ali, qira'ah according to Ibn Mas'ud?
Why don't we? There is no qira'ah because there is no dots and vowels.
That's right.
They're too early for that. But do we even have a manuscript to support those in generation 1? And what about Abu Abdul Ar-Rahman al-Sulami? Where is his manuscript? And where is his qira'ah? So even that, and remember, he's only got 1 strand between him and Asim. Remember, you can't have 1 strand for it to be canonical.
You're talking about the chain of narrations here.
There has to be more than 1, and yet you only have 1 strand between him.
Which is the isnad.
That's right, the isnad there. And so you can see even that in and of itself obviates and throws out. Now, when we get to the next slide, here you have generation 0 is Muhammad, then Ubay ibn Ka'b. His became very popular up in Damascus. Then you have 2 more generations before you get to Nafi. And Nafis is the 4th generation, and then Warsh and Qalun come from him. They are the 5th generation. So it's not consistent, these generations that we're going through. But this God, it's confusing, isn't it? Let's put
It is. I mean, I doubt that a lot of Muslims can even comprehend what you're showing here.
What we're saying is generation 0, 1, 2, and 3, there are no manuscripts to show for it. This is nothing more than attributions. These are attributed to these individuals. Attributed by who? By Al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, by Al-Tabari. These are late 9th and 10th century. Late 9th and 10th century, attributing back to the 7th century and early 8th century.
And there's something to be said here, and if we can show that slide one more time, if there's something to be said here about a correlation between the writing of the manuscripts and the qira'at. It appears that when the writing system was implemented that allows you to use the vowels, to use the diacritical markings, to use the dottings, you begin to see the qira'at issue pop up.
The Qira'at issue pops up only after the dots and the vowels.
Yeah.
Why is it that we have all these attributions to all these other individuals with all these other Qurans? Where are these Qurans? Where are their manuscripts? Where are any of these individuals? And how is it that we even know whether any are correct? And that's why I keep on, historically speaking, I'm always ever going and getting these quotes from the 8th, 9th, and 10th century. I want to know what's happened to the 7th century. We're only talking about 1400 years ago. Listen, you can come down to the British Library and I'll show you an entire New Testament from the 4th century, the Sinaiticus. Right next to it, in the glass cabinet next to it, is the Alexandrinus. That's from the 5th century. And you could go down to Rome and you get the Vaticanus from the 4th century. That is 200 to 300 years before this time period we're looking at.
That's right.
And if we can preserve 3 complete metropolitan codices, if we can have at least 365 either partial or complete codices of the New Testament by the 6th century, why can't the Muslims even come up with one of what is considered to be for them the greatest manuscript in the history of mankind, the greatest text in the history of mankind, which is the Quran itself, when they are the ones that tell us that 5 were created by Uthman in 652, sent to 5 cities, Mecca, Medina, Basra, Kufa, and Damascus. Where is even one of them in these first 3 generations?
They were preserved in memory.
Obviously, they weren't preserved even in memory because it's nothing more than pie in the sky. I don't care for pie in the sky. Before I die, especially, I want to make sure that and this is why I keep on asking Muslims, this is nothing more than attributions. This is nothing more than you're only attributing it to these individuals. I would like to know, why is it that nobody was able to preserve something this important? Now, let's now put it on a timeline. To show you why this is important, let's go to a timeline. And I'm going to put a timeline from the 7th century. Here we are. There is Muhammad. He dies in 632. Okay, so we can put him up there next. We begin with one Quran with him, right? He receives one Quran, and he receives it between 610 and 632 when he dies. Now, however, as we're told by the traditions again, we're told this by Al-Bukhari and others, that he wanted some more. A lot of people could not understand it. So he asked Jibril to give him others. So Jibril now gives him another 6. So now we have 7 readings. So from one Quran, we now go to 7 Qurans. You see that? From 1/7, now we're up to 7 Qurans by the time he dies. So there should be 7 different Qurans or 7 different recitations. I would suggest that these must be Qurans. You can see why I'm saying they're Qurans, because what's going to happen in another 20 years. But let's go to that 20 years. So then Uthman comes around, and in 652, 20 years later, he then takes all of these other, because of what happened with Shuba, they're up in Azerbaijan, he then is told we must get it back to one Quran again. One only Quran, that's the Qurayshi Quran. So let's get rid of the 7 and put up 1 again. We're back to 1 again. So by 652, there is only 1 Quran. Now, whatever. We now know that 5 copies were sent to 5 cities. Which cities are we talking about? Let's take a look at the map there. I put the map up there. This is a map created in the 20th century, attributing it back to what they thought it looked like in the 7th century. I don't want to get into whether or not this is correct or not, but let's just look at these cities. So the first city is what they call Yathrib. Now that becomes later Medina.
Right.
One was sent to Mecca. So those are that would be the Hijaz, the central part of Arabia. One was sent to Basra. One was sent to Kufa, which is Al-Hira there, because that's the Sassanian name. It's now Kufa today. And then one was sent up to Damascus. It was called Damascus. It's still Damascus today. Why have I got black circles around those and green ones around the 2 there in the Hijaz? There's a reason for that. Can you guess?
Well, it appears that those were either earlier or more common versus the one in the green.
No, they're corrupt. These are the corrupt copies. And
The
that's
green
why-
one?
Those three that are in there, those are
The
not-
black one, okay.
Remember, they had a battle on this. This is why Hudayfa came from that area, coming back, and he says, we've got to do something. We don't want to have the same thing that the Christians and Jews have. We must make sure that it comes back to the Qurayshi. So what does Uthman do? Well, he goes
What do
and
you
he
mean
takes
is
that
like
and returns. He replaces each one of those black ones with
the
a green
different
one.
readings, basically.
This is the Qurayshi. He takes out the Kufan, he takes out the Basran reading, he takes out the Damascus reading, and replaces it with the Qurayshi. Now we have 5 Qurayshi cities, 5 Qurayshi dialects.
And we want to be, I want to be careful here because even you know that this is just one tradition that says 5 cities. There is others that says 4. There is other that says Yemen was included. There is other that we can count up to 9.
Actually, if you want to, let me show you what the 9 are.
Yeah.
Basra, Baghdad, Damascus, Jerusalem, Cairo, Alexandria, Aden, Herat, and Nishapur. That's 9 cities that actually, if they're talking about every province, those 9 cities that were under his province at the time of Uthman. So if you want to just start with 5, I would say I'd like to find 9. We cannot find 9. We can't even find 5. I'd like to even find 1.
Right.
I'd be happy with just 1. Let's go back to the slide again. So that's what we now know from 652. Hold on a minute. We now are been told that Ubay ibn Ka'b up in Damascus has another one. And his does not agree. His has 116 surahs. You had a great talk with Samuel Green on this. He went on and on about this. This is amazing stuff.
Right.
And this is all coming out of Arthur Jeffries that you just mentioned about. He talks about Ubay ibn Ka'b. Ubay ibn Ka'b was supposed to, even Yasser Qadi talked about Ubay ibn Ka'b. You remember? He
That's
is the
right.
best of the best. You can't get better than Ubay ibn Ka'b.
That is right.
If that is the case, why is his not agree with the Quran we have today?
And why don't we have a qira'at according to Ubay?
And where is it?
There you go.
Okay, that's not the only one. We have another one that comes from Ibn Masud. So I put it back to red again. I'm saying, hold on a minute. We're not finished with the 7th century. Even in the 7th century, you have 2 different Qurans. One is 116 surahs. The other is either 110 or 111, because you find both of them. You have both references. So I put 111 just to give them a benefit of the doubt. But that's still 3 less than is in the Quran that we have today.
That's right. We have 114.
Okay, then there's another one, and that's Ibn Musa. And his down in here in Basra. And his doesn't agree. Now, he does have the same amount of surahs, but as Arthur Jeffrey says, if you take all 3 of them and put them together, Arthur Jeffrey found as many as 15,000 differences between those 3 and the Hafs that we have today, the Quran that we have today. Now, that's fascinating because that was done in just in the 1930s by an Australian. Why is it a Muslim did this work?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating that our Muslim friends always try to quote Orientalists that match their own thinking, but yet whenever somebody contradicted, they just ignore everything. And you won't find a single Muslim scholar doing a PhD on something like this.
So which is the one that is actually used today?
I mean, I would say recently we're seeing, names of Muslims now who are at least venture into this. But I'm saying, throughout the history, why don't we find Muslim scholars doing this?
We cannot find any Muslim scholar doing it. Now, Dr. Shadi Nasser is doing, Hikmak Nasser is actually coming the closest to it.
That's right.
Now, you notice there's one name that's missing up there. Ubay ibn Ka'b, Ibn Masud, Ibn Musa. Who's the one that we need to get to? We need to get to Zayd ibn Thabit. Zayd ibn Thabit, and his then is, we think, not corrupted. His is actually the Qurayshi one. His is the only Qurayshi one. That's the one that was sent to 5 cities. But you've got this problem here because you have a whole other tradition from the 7th century. And this is the problem of the 7th century narrative. The 7th century narrative has not answered these predicaments. Not only does Uthman destroy all those from the north, destroy those from Basra and Kufa and Damascus, we now have these other traditions that say there were still other manuscripts that became popular in those cities which did not agree. Why haven't Muslims answered this question?
Right, and Michael Cook, by the way, about 10 years ago, did a study on the possible 4 copies, and he found that the copy in Medina, which supposedly would have been the center where Uthman was, has still differences with the other copies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the 7th century. What I want to do next now is to go to the 8th century, but we'll do that for another episode.
Very good. So I think everybody is starting to catch on now what's going on. Today, what Jay did is to show you the beginning of this idea of qira'at and why the question is, we have one today, Hafs, that is considered to be the most popular or most accepted, or let's say canonized standard copy of the Quran, when we just demonstrated to you on that chart that he is not even close to the action And if you look at the chain of narration, he was third or fourth basically generation compared to the ones that were with the Prophet himself, especially scribes like Ubay and Zayd ibn Thabit and Ibn Mas'ud. So you, hopefully, folks, you can see now the problem, why it is so serious. You probably can even appreciate what Yasser Qadhi says, that there are holes in the narrative, and we're beginning to see those holes that Yasser Qadhi have alluded to. What is it that we're going to cover next time?
What we're going to do is we're going to then now look at the 8th century. We've just looked at the 7th century.
So you're taking it century by century.
I'm taking these 2 centuries only because these are the 2 centuries where the holes really start to appear. And because before we get into this whole list of Qira'ats that I have on the table here, which is come to the end century, I wanted to first start with the 7th century. Before we even get into the Qira'at problem, we've got some real problems because we're not even, non-Muslims are not still explaining how could Muhammad have received 7 recitations when he didn't even leave Mecca or Medina. Where did he get this suddenly ability to understand Kufa dialect or Basra dialect or even Damascus dialect?
That's right.
More than that, why is it that when Uthman comes and finally brings him from 7 back down to 1 again, why are these 5 sent to 5 cities with the understanding that they were to retain that Qurayshi dialect? That's why they were sent then. And then we also get these traditions that come up and say, well, wait, there's Ubay ibn Ka'b, there's also Ibn Mas'ud, there's Abu Musa. They were up in Basra, Kufa, and Damascus, and that's why you have the red circles up there, because those do not agree with the Qurayshi dialect. That in and of itself, from the 7th century, nobody has answered yet. And then I'd like to know is, where is Ubay ibn Ka'b's codex? Where is Ibn Mas'ud's codex? Where is this codex that has only 111? Where is Ubay ibn Ka'b's that has 116? Where is Ibn Musa's codex? If they're that important, why is it suddenly they just have disappeared? And then most importantly, where is Zayd ibn Thabit's codex? I want to know where the mother lode is. I want to know where the Textus Receptus that we talk about in the Bible, I like to see where their Textus Receptus is. Now, once we have asked these questions, we're now going to go to the 8th century and ask a whole nother set of questions. That's for the next episode.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you, Dr. J, next time. And we ask that you tune in next time so that you can begin to watch how we're going to assess these Qira'at issue in the 8th century. Until then, have a blessed day. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, Sira International. Also, click on the bell so that you can receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or we go live. And I would like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking on the link right below, and that way you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you on how you can give to our channel. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.